Hey there, welcome to the channel. I'm Cindy Daychuck with Queen Bee Creations, and it shouldn't come as a surprise that this is the next thing we're going to be working on. Now, this is truly an antique piece, so, you know, look away if you don't want to see it painted. Sorry. All this, and don't plug your ears. Anyway, I mean, painting is what I do. You know what, here's the unfortunate thing for all the natural wood lovers out there. You're in a minority, and most people are getting rid of pieces like this, especially that have that orangey cast to them, because they don't want them in their homes. But if I paint them, then they will buy them, they will use them. These pieces get to be loved again. And you know, there may be some time in the future that natural wood pieces have a resurgence. It just isn't now. And you know, in which case this still exists, you can take it back to natural wood, but if it goes into a dump or a landfill, it's done. So this piece, this topper, you can see is separate. It gets bolted on. I've got it removed so that I can paint it, and it has this heavy antique beveled mirror that will go in there. And I mean, this is got the wood backing. This is a solid heavy piece, so I will attach it again once I'm able to finish the top and finish the harp and drawer separately. It's just going to be a lot easier to do. First up, of course, with any piece like this, is to truly give it a good clean. I don't know, apart from the fact it's been living in the back 40 here for the past 8 to 10 months, until I got around to it. I don't know where it lived all those years and decades before. So we need to clean it off. We need to get all that grime off. And for that, I am using Fusion's TSP alternative. So you're going to dilute this. You're going to take a couple of capfuls into a bucket of water, and it's going to help get all of that grime and dirt and everything off the piece. It's going to help prep my surface as well for any of the paint that's coming. We ultimately are going to finish this in a very traditional way. So I'm not doing anything super wild and crazy. It's a beautiful piece with a lot of ridges and details. And I love that. I am going simple for this. I'm not looking to do transfers. I'm not looking to do a paint inlay. I'm not looking to add detail. It has lots of detail. And, you know, if you're looking to do a lot of transfers and paint inlays on pieces, which we know that I do, I look for simpler pieces. I look for pieces that don't have a lot of character of their own. This already has so much beautiful detail. I'm hoping that the one missing hanger for this is in here somewhere. Fingers crossed, because it's beautiful hardware and I don't want to have to replace it if I can avoid it. So my first job is I'm going to get this all cleaned, hardware off, everything prepped and ready for me, and then we'll come back and talk about the next step. I just brought you in close to show you one of the ways that you can tell when a piece is really old is when you take off the old hardware and you find piles and piles of like a decade's worth. Well, we're probably talking multiple decades, 40, 50 years worth of dirt and grime that have collected underneath your hardware. Well, as luck would have it, I can't find a replacement piece of hardware. So that one little handle that I was missing, this was such antique hardware that it would be a crazy search, and I can't find just the little piece that fits in there either. So I've checked all of my resources, I've checked things like restoration hardware, but we're starting to get to, and this is what often happens, is when it comes to antique hardware, that it becomes such a crazy exorbitant price. So I I am not looking to charge as much as that for this piece, in which case we're just gonna flip the hardware out with something from my stash. And so it does mean that I need to plug all of these holes. So I'm gonna plug all the holes, leave it to dry overnight. So I popped in here on my one day that I'm not in the shop. See how well that goes. So I've popped in here for that. I have a couple of pics to take for someone who saw something they want on eBay and just need some additional images. So I'm gonna plug these holes, let them dry overnight so that tomorrow when I'm officially back in the shop, I can sand as I do the rest of the deep cleaning of the piece. So kind of makes sense before I spend a lot of time cleaning these drawers that I get them filled and sanded, and then I'll just clean it all at once. Bit of a bummer, really like that hardware, but I at least have 4 good pulls that I could use on another piece if it needs some antique hardware and what it's got doesn't work for it anymore. So it'll all work out in the end. I have my piece all washed. You can see almost that this is a slightly duller finish. The TSP alternative solution that I use, it's not actual TSP, just something less chemically, tends to dull it down, make it go a little bit more matte, and it just creates a little bit more of a gripping surface, which is great. You can see that I have filled those holes and I've sanded them smooth. We're just gonna have to re-drill for the new hardware. But because, so for 2 reasons. One, because this is kind of orange and I'm going very light paint color, relatively light, there are odds that I'm gonna get bleed through. On the drawers where I've had to sand, where I added the wood filler, and I've kind of broken through that sort of top coat surface, likely that I'm gonna get bleed through. So it makes sense for me to put on a protectant. In this case, what I am planning on using, this is a Salvation Solution by DIY. It looks a little cloudy, but this is actually the clear. So there are 2 types. Very often I'm using white. Just because if I'm painting something a solid white, then the primer, the stain blocker, if it's colored, it just means 1 less coat of my paint. Because for this one, I'm going to be using a milk paint to paint it, and I could get some chipping back to show some of the original wood. I don't want it to chip back to like a white primer or a white stain blocker. So DIY, their Salvation Solution, which, you know, is that stain blocker, comes in either white or clear. And I've opted to use clear. And all I'm going to do is just take my brush and just lightly, smoothly cover all of my wood surfaces with that blocker and let it dry fully before I go and I start to paint any of my coats. In this case, you know, I don't always do the stain blocker. If I was doing a dark color or especially a blended mottled finish, I probably wouldn't bother, and I would just spot treat any spots if they happen to appear. But because I am doing a chippy finish, I'm going to be exposing some of that wood. I'm going to be going with a light coat, light colored coat. Not doing this is probably just asking for trouble. So in this instance, we're going to go with better safe than sorry. So I'm going to do this to the entire piece, let it dry fully, which means I'm going to let it dry overnight. And just so that there's no reaction between this and my milk paint, because I'd still like to have fairly good adhesion. I'd like to have some coverage with my milk paint. and then we're good to go. Now you saw me stir this up. You would always want to stir a product like this, one, to be able to make sure that anything that has settled to the bottom, which is part of the seal or part of the goodness of the product, is thoroughly mixed through it. Unlike paint, you know, with this kind of product or top coats, you don't want to shake them and create bubbles. So it is something that you do want to just stir up and just be able to mix up, make sure that it's nice and smooth, and then you're good to go. So I'm just going to carry on with the entire piece. There's lots of little pieces here because we've got the mirror, and then we've got the mirror holder, and then we've got the base, and then all of the drawers. So the 3 big ones, and then the little mini drawer. But I'm going to get them all done, ready and drying, and then we'll be good to add paint. Hopefully tomorrow. We are ready to begin painting. But my first step is to mix up the paint, because I'm going to use on this, I'm going to use milk paint. And milk paint is a very traditional paint. It's one of the original paints that's out there. So on a piece this old, it would have been very typical for it to be painted with milk paint. And it's the chippy paint. So we'll see what kind of chipping that we get, whether too much, too little, just enough. Always a guessing game. So for this, I am going to be using Sweet Pickins milk paint in Purple Posies, which is kind of a light mauvey gray. So for this, and here's the trick, all milk paint comes in a powder form, and you mix it as you go, as you need it. That's one of the beauties of milk paint, because it means it's shelf stable. It never goes bad. You can have it forever. The downside is that once you mix it, then it's not shelf stable and you need to use it. You can, usually you just mix what you need as you go. You can keep it for a day or two, usually wrapped tightly and in the fridge, milk product, right? And you kind of just use it as you go. And usually if I mix a little too much, then I start looking around for other things. You can use this as a stain on raw wood. Very natural, tends to last a long time. If you look at, you know, if you go to get a really old antique piece and it's got this kind of old sort of, it looks almost like what we do with chalk paint now. It's got this kind of matte, dusty, stained kind of look to it. That was milk paint. Lasts a long time when it's in the raw natural wood stage. So to mix this up, we're going to do a couple things. I'm just realizing I'm going to want a little bit of extra bond in this. I'll explain what that is in a second, but I'm going to go get it and come back. So milk paint is that original paint that will chip and flake. So if you like that shabby chic look, milk paint is going to be the best way to be able to get that look. And really for that chippy look, it's probably the only way to get that authentic look. You can do stuff with heat gunning other paint, kind of forcing it to do some of that, using glue underneath it to form some crackles and chipping, but you're not, and you know, sanding is going to get you a distressed look, but it's not going to get you that real chippy look, and that's what milk paint does. I like to use warm water for this, and generally the mixing ratios of this are 50-50, right? Half part paint and half part water. I kind of eyeball it, and I use an immersion blender. So right now I haven't added any extra bond. I'm going to blend this. If you're mixing a small amount of paint, then just use like a little wire whisk or something. This is going to be easier for me down here. I'm going to add a little bit of extra bond. So just maybe 2 tablespoons. 1, 2. Because I want a little bit of chipping. Some colors tend to chip a little bit more than others, but a lot of it just really depends upon the surface. With this being an old pine surface, and now I've got the Salvation solution, I don't think I've ever done milk paint directly over Salvation solution. So I don't know how much this is going to impact the chipping, whether it's going to lead to more or less. I'm thinking maybe more, which is why I opted to use the bonding. It's not unusual to have some lumps. They will settle to the bottom. There's always, when you use the immersion blender, there's always a lot of foam. So here's what I like to do. I like to mix up my paint and leave it to sit for about half an hour. It gives the milk solids in the paint an opportunity to kind of absorb a lot of that water. You'll find that the bubbles will settle, they'll be gone, the milk paint will be a little bit thicker, a little bit richer. It gives you a better idea of whether or not you want to add more of the paint mix to it, or you need a little bit of water. As it sits, it will naturally start to thicken up, not only with the milk solids absorbing more of the water, but with evaporation as well. So over time, even painting, like when you go to paint your second coat, you may want to add another little bit of water to it. So it's very, I was gonna say playable. It's not really a word, but you get what I mean. So I'm gonna let this sit, and then we'll come back and start to apply our paint. Okay, my paint is ready to go, and I just give it a little stir every so often, just so that anything that's settling to the bottom doesn't. And what I like to do are thin coats of this. So, and especially the first coat, just because I like to, as with all paints, just get some of the paint on, let it kind of grip onto the surface. And again, this is a piece I will be distressing, so any of the metallic sections I can sand back afterward. But this is such a lovely, pretty, kind of soft mauve, kind of almost a gray. It'll definitely look mauve when it's done, but I expect, because this is so orange, this piece, that I'm gonna be doing 3 thin coats for sure. 2 just isn't gonna cut it. So I expect 3 thin coats of this, and you know, none of it's challenging painting. It's all easy painting. Just go slow, do your thing, let it dry, do it again. I have 3 light coats of my milk paint on, and it's now time to sand. I do have some very definite chipping taking place in along those grooves. I don't know. There you can see some of that. So as soon as I start to sand, that's all coming off. The rest of it, where it's smooth, I just want to knock it back a little bit and make it smoother for when I go to apply my finish. And I'm using 220 grit. That's it. That's all that it's going to take to be able to knock that back and just kind of smooth that out. So in all of the highs, sorry about the sound, that's all that I need. When it goes for the grooves, I'm gonna take my sandpaper around my finger, and again, I'm just gonna go nice and easy here. I don't want to create more chipping than is needed. I want to see how much chipping I've got before I start distressing the rest of the piece. But this is what I'm going to be up to for the next little while. Getting this all sanded and then dusted. So once you've got all the sand, you want to get all of those little microscopic pieces of dust off. So I'm going to be wiping it down a couple of times to make sure that all happens. Next step in the process for this is to get these sealed. Now, I am going to be using a product. Okay, You don't buy it in size like this. You buy it in small containers. But this is Sweet Pickins Milk Paint white oil wax. So I had this sitting upside down to get some of the stuff from the bottom up there. And I had been stirring it and shaking it up. So it's kind of ready to go. So it's kind of this creamy white. What I'm going to do with this, because it's going to leave kind of like a nice kind of soft kind of look over it. I don't want to be dripping my brush into there to contaminate it. So I've taken a clean cup and I've poured this out. And I'm just going to leave my cup off to the side. So I've got a clean brush. And here's what we do with this. I am going to brush this on my piece. And then I'm going to let it sit for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then I'm going to come and wipe the excess away. So we're going to let this sit. Okay, now this is an oil-based, because I said oil wax, so it's an oil-based product. I'm using a chip brush because I don't like to have to clean my oil-based products if I can avoid it. I'm lazy that way. But what this will do is not only serve to seal this, and it gives a really nice durable finish, but you're going to see that the white is going to kind of drift across the mauve. It's going to soften the looks, and it's going to sit into any of the grooves that we've got happening here, which is good because that's where I've got some of the chipping. So it's gonna create a nice finish. So you can see that there's a fair bit of product sitting on top, but we're gonna leave it to sit. Okay, clean up some of my drips. We're gonna leave it to sit and then come back and we'll wipe away and I'll show you some of the difference then. All right, when it is time, you just take a clean, lint-free rag and you just wipe. And I like to wipe just in the direction of my finish. You're gonna have some of that white drifting across your piece. So think about how you want it to look as it does its thing. Oh, I love this. So you're just looking for a nice smooth finish. Look at that. See the white sitting down in those crevices. That's it. So easy. And we just leave it overnight to dry. Okay. This has had time to dry. Just, you know what, that oil wax is still a little bit tacky down in the crevices, but it's dry on top. So I can carry on and do what I need to do and then leave it to, let me see where you need to see. So what I do need to do, because we filled all the hardware holes, is I need to drill new ones. The easiest way for me to do this, because I don't want to make a mistake, I tape paper together to make a template. So I set it up so that it is perfectly level at the top, so that that top left corner. Doesn't matter if I have overhang down here, because I'm just using that top edge to line everything up. So I laid out one of my handles and I marked off where the holes would be. To be able to get them over here, what I did was I folded this together, and my original holes, I poked a pin through it so that it would be equal on this side. Does that make sense? So that what I'm going to do to drill my hole, so make sure I'm drilling from the top. The other thing that I did was I took a screw, one of the screws that came with my hardware, and I drilled a hole into a spare board and made sure that it would be the right size. I don't want it to be too small. I mean, that's the better way to go because then I could drill bigger, but I definitely don't want it to be big, too big and have this pop through. So once that's done and you get this lined up, you actually, okay, moment of truth time. You just drill through the paper. Well, guys, here's the finished piece. This is such a pretty mauve color, nice and soft, and I really, really like the white oil wax, just kind of softens it even further. It's kind of got this cloudy feeling coming across it. Now, I will say this, I thought the mirror went the other way around, and I tried to assemble it that way, realized it didn't work. So I do have to paint the top, which I thought was the bottom, so I didn't paint it. So I need to do that now. Just, you know, in the interest of full disclosure. The hardware we had to switch out, but I think that the little library pull here and these little cup pulls work great. This was in a bronze color, these were in copper, so I finished them off in flat soft iron from Rust-Oleum metallic. One of my favorite colors. It's not silver, it's not shiny, it's just kind of perfect. I think that the softness fits with the piece. I hope that you picked up some tips. I think we got the perfect amount of chipping and just in the right spots all along those details, which is where you would have wanted to have distressed anyway. So it kind of worked out perfect, really. I couldn't have asked for better. Let me know what you think of this one, guys. Hopefully you got a couple of good tips along the way. Always my goal that you're learning something new or it's inspiring you to try something new. If you haven't given milk paint a try, you know, I love it. I think that you get great finishes from it. I have no problem with milk paint. I have no problem with the DIY clay paint or some chalk paints as well. Fusion, I love. They all give you different looks, different finishes. Really depends upon the piece and what you're after. This is an older piece. I wanted to go with an older, more traditional finish. I think it really suits that piece. And I'll take a couple of pics for you because I don't think you'll see the missing paint on the top. And I'm gonna go mix up some more paint and make the top look just as pretty. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Until then, take care.